Okay, we're going to start taking a look at how to apply some of the Excel stuff that we've learned in the lecture. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to work with example 2.2 from the textbook. Now, a majority of these examples that we'll do in the class will come from the textbook, so you can be able to go into the textbook and read the stuff if you need it. I am going to show you how to work it live in Excel, and as I go through it, I'm going to be doing some other things because I'll be talking about some of the stuff that's important, especially in the context of what you'll use in the next class when you take 690. So I might bring up some stuff that really isn't in the book, but that's okay. Like I said, you'll be able to use it when you go along. Now, what we are going to do, this video is going to be broken up into a couple of different parts. One will be Excel, and then there will also be a example, the same example, importing this data into Tableau. So anyway, we have this data in the next tab here that's given to us in the book. It's 14,000 data points, so just a couple. And the columns are all listed there: data purchase, identifying number, customer, blah, 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 blah. And so what we want to do is we want to sit down and figure out the gender breakdown, and then we're going to look at the income breakdown, and then we will look at the top 3 stores and just some easy ways on how to do things. Now, the book has already kind of populated a little bit of this table, so we don't have to start from complete scratch. So one of the first things I want to do is we're taking a look at this data here, and there's quite a lot of stuff going on. And sometimes, especially as we're putting together our tables for counting, it'll be nice to be able to filter out some of this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to this first row here. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go to Data. And then if you look, there's this filter icon. It allows us to filter the different columns. You notice we've got this radio button here. So what I can do is I can click on this, and it's going to tell me everything that's in it. And so I can say something like, okay, only show me drinks. Don't. It is showing me drinks. I can come over to income and go, okay, well, tell me the income of 150,000. And since I've got multiple filters going here, it's only showing me drinks purchased by people that have an annual income of over $150,000. So I'm going to go back and just clear out both of those filters. And so that's just a way to help us take a look at the data. So now let's go to this first section, and we're going to do the income and the gender. So parts 1 and 2 are very similar. We're going to actually end up using pretty much the same thing. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do it. We are going to do it the traditional Excel way, and then I will also show you how to do it with a pivot table. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we've got gender listed as just F and M. So we'll just use those. And so in this column, I'm going to put F for females, I'm going to put M for males. And what I want to do now is I want to count the number of instances of F in that other chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, I'm going to start my equation with equals, and I'm going to go to count if. And as you can see, before you do the parentheses, the Excel help pops up, counts the number of cells within a range that meet the criteria. And that's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to this other sheet. Now I want you to count all this gender column. And I am just holding it and dragging it down. Why don't I just pick D, the top of the column, and deal with that? Sometimes that works, but most of the time it does cause some issues, especially with titles in there. So what I try to always tell people is the cleanest way to do it is to drag down. Yes, I know, especially with this many data points, it takes a couple seconds, but this works 100% of the time, and it's always just good to get in these habits of pulling all those. So I've got all that data, D2 to D, 14,060. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F4, and that automatically brings in my $ operators, which is automatically going to lock that in. So when I drag it, nothing happens. Okay, so you see up here it says count if range. We just get in the range. That's the range it's going into. Now we have to give it the criteria. So I'm going to hit comma, And when I do now, we see that criteria pops up in bold. And so I want it to count off of my tables all the Fs. Now, I'm not going to lock this one in because I want to drag it down and have the equation populate. So if I finish that, boom. So it tells me there's 7,170 females. And I'm just going to drag this down and take a look at it. You notice this didn't change, but this rolled down to the next one. So it counts the number of males for me and gives me 6,889 males. So it went through all that data and just counted all the instances of F and M. Now to find the percentage, I mean, we could sum these together, but let's go and we'll do just a regular count. And we'll just count the number of variables, and we're going to do the same thing. In fact, I'm going to cheat. Let's cancel out of that since I know it's going to go from data, which is the tab. So data exclamation point, if you are referencing data from another tab, it's going to, kind of like the address, it's going to be in there, and then these cells. So all I'm going to do is, I'm going to copy this because I don't want to have to go over and redo that. And we're just going to come in here, we'll use count. And I'm going to build this up into a couple sections. So we're just going to count the number of cells there. This is already formatted for percent. So let's just drop it over here because I just want to make sure, put the equal sign in there, make an equation. I just want to make sure my function's working. And my function, I just have the data in there. Count. I want to count all those data points here. And it tells me 0. So that's not the... It was count A. Yeah, sorry, count A. Number of cells that are not empty. So there we go, 14,059. You get to see all of my mistakes as I do this. You can see that I am not perfect, but I try to be. And so now what I want to do is I want to use that to build my percentage here. And so all I'm going to do is say, we're going to take this, we're going to divide it by this other function that I put together. So we're going to nest those functions together, and that's going to tell us that 51% of our customers are female. I'll drag that down, double check my equation. There we go. 5149. Hey, you know what? That tells me that as 100%, that's what I'm expecting. So this one's not too interesting. Let's skip to the second one. I'm not going to bother with the pivot table up here, but I will give a pivot table on this one. So what we got to do is we need to break it down by income now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build that. We're going to build a column chart to show graphically what's going on. So the first thing I need to do is income. So we need to break it down by income. If we go and we look at our data, and we go all the way back up here to annual income, you can see that we already have an income breakdown. So that's great. I want to use those categories. And so we're just going to go and type those categories out. Now I am going to cheat because I already wrote down what those are. I'll double click here just to make it wider. So if I go back to my data and look at it once again, you'll see that 10 to 30, 110, all that stuff there. I've just taken all of those numbers and I've put them in here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to basically run the same equation that we did up here, which is a COUNTIF and using the data. Now this column is in data H and not D, and that's important because it's a lot of data points. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this equation I've already written, and then I'm going to modify it for my purposes. So I'm going to drop that down. Now that's still counting all the stuff in column D. We went over and looked at that. We know that's column H. So I'm just going to change it to H because I don't really feel like highlighting that again. Now this is also counting instances up here of A4. Well, down here I'm A26. So I'm just going to type it in and change it. And you can see it highlights down here, so we're grabbing the right spot. And so we got 3,090 people that are in that column. And the reason I did it like that is, once again, just big numbers. It's easy enough for me to change the column indicators. It's a little bit more advanced. You can still go back and click and drag, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just I tend to get a little bit lazy, and I like doing things like that just to change over my formulas. Now, if we look at it, this is locked in. So as we index the equation down, it's not going to change. This one will. So if I go and I just double click here, runs it to the end of our set, does all the counts for us. And so now we are going to go and we're going to make our percentage. So one thing that we can do is I can come down here. Instead of doing that count, I'll just make a total, and I'll say we're going to equal the sum of all that. And so it tells me 14,059 instances, which we already knew. And then I'm just going to percentage. I'm going to take that number. I'm going to divide it by the total. I'm going to hit F4 to give us our locked in so we can roll that down. And there we are. And so that gives us the percentage of our stuff. Now, I did promise you I'm going to do it another way, so let's do this using a pivot table. So if I go into data, and then this is all my data here in my data tab, and actually not data, we're going to go into Power Pivot, and that's going to give us all of the stuff that we need to do pivot tables. You'll have to excuse me, we don't want to use Power Pivot. That's a higher level thing. I just actually want to go to good old pivot table. Now, since I'm already in the data, you can see the little walking ants around everything. So it's automatically picking up everything I need because we need to create this table. And where is it going to be placed? We're going to put it in existing worksheet because I want to put it over here, and we'll just drop it right in there and hit OK. And so now we have our pivot table. We can start playing around with things. We've got our columns, our rows, our sum ups. Kind of similar a little bit to Tableau with the way that we put this stuff together. And so now let's put everything that we need in here to basically give us. Okay, and so we can drag the fields in there. So what I want to get is I want to grab the income part. So we got annual income. So we're going to drag that in. That is going to be our rows. And so there we go. We've got all of our rows. And so now we've got columns. We've also got our summation values here. And so this is what we're going to want to put together. So now we want to count the number of people that we have in each of those. So one way we can do that, if we go back and look at our data, we can gender, marital status, all these things are not unique but customer IDs. So I'm going to click on customer ID. It's automatically going to drop it in the sum values. And that gives us a sum of all the customer IDs, which is not what we want. We want to count them. So we're going to go to value field settings. And instead of sum, we just want it to count. And there we go. So it counts all of them for us right from the pivot table. Percentages we haven't done yet, but the numbers check out. So that's good. So now we're going to do our next, which will be the percentages, and then we're going to fix the names up here. Okay, so we need to get percentages. So I basically want another column just like that. So I'm going to drag customer ID again into the column. Defaults to sum. So let's go here, value field. We want to do a count. And then show values as. We have all these different things. Let's say percentage of grand total. And hit OK. So that gives us our percents. And now we need to clean this up a little bit because it is not labeled correctly. And we want to change that. And we will do that in the next little video.